Hello again, I'm Chuck Todd, and welcome to Meet the Press Reports. This is where we explore a single topic in depth. Today, we're going to look at how the Democratic Party lost rural America. Let's start here. In 1996, Bill Clinton, as he was running for a second term, he won 1,117 rural counties. That was good for about 50% of all American rural counties as defined by the Department of Agriculture. 12 years later, in Barack Obama's first successful term, he won 455 rural counties. All told, that accounted for about 23% of all rural counties at the time. You can already see a significant decline. Well, guess what? 12 years later, in 2020, it got worse. Joe Biden won just 194 rural counties, running against Donald Trump. That accounts for just about 10% of all rural counties in the United States. And there's no indication the party's standing has improved at all. Here's our March 2022 NBC poll, where the Democratic Party's favorability rating is a lackluster 14 points underwater overall. And look at this. In rural America, it's 41 points underwater. The only place where it's positive these days is in urban America. So why is all this happening? And could this trend spell long-term doom for the Democratic Party and essentially block them from ever controlling the United States Senate again? We're going to go to North Carolina with NBC's Antonia Hilton, where voters are losing interest not only in the Democratic Party, but in the small d democratic process itself. But there's perhaps no better place to tell the story of the Democratic Party's problems with rural voters than in the state of Iowa, which is where we recently talked to some remaining Democrats.
In northeastern Iowa, Democrats know their brand is in trouble. A cluster of Mississippi River counties mirroring the toxic national environment for Democrats in rural America. In 1992, Democrats won 51% of the rural vote. By 2016, that number was just 35%. And rural voters have been identifying as Republicans by wider and wider margins. Last year, 52% of small town and rural voters identified as Republican, compared to just 26% who called themselves Democrats. A 26-point Republican advantage.
I'm here in Elkader, Iowa. It's part of Clayton County here in northeastern Iowa. This is a county that Democrats carried in 7 consecutive presidential elections. In 2008, Barack Obama won this county by 17 points. In 2016, though, Donald Trump would crush Hillary Clinton here by 22. 4 years later, Donald Trump's advantage would only grow.
Do you feel as if simply having a D next to your name is why you lost?
Yes.
Patty Ruff lost her state house seat representing Clayton County in 2016.
We had our picture taken with Hillary Clinton stop by, as all candidates do.
Sure.
And I, full-heartedly, I guess, now in retrospect, but I posted it. I was a proud mom, and I posted it on Facebook. And they used that. They cut my son out.
Literally, you have a picture with Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
And that's all they did.
Yep, they ran it.
You're a national Democrat.
Yep.
Clayton was one of 31 counties that were carried by Barack Obama and Donald Trump, overwhelmingly rural and home to roughly a quarter of all Iowans. In 2020, Biden failed to win a single one of these counties back.
There was no way Biden was going to win Iowa in 2020. It just was not going to happen.
Brian Brunig chairs the Clayton County Democratic Party. Any version of Joe Biden?
None. It was not going to happen as long as Trump was on the thing.
You sound like somebody who's lost a lot, and it's taken a toll.
Well, it's exhausting. It's really, these last 2 cycles have been a real killer, and we've lost a lot of folks have dropped out of participating. Even as volunteers.
We got annihilated in 2020. Democrats did here in Iowa in the state races.
Ruby Bodeker ran and lost a campaign for State House in 2020.
I feel like an exhausted rural Democrat. I'm tired. I feel like there's a lot of weight on me. I honestly just want to be done a lot of days. I mean, I have 4 kids. I have a full-time job. I'm a single mom. I work. I don't even make $15 an hour, and I'm tired.
For decades, Democratic candidates played up their rural roots.
Nearly half a century ago, I was born not too far from here in the little town of Hope, Arkansas.
My mother worked in the mills when she was young. My father worked in the mills for 36 years.
My Kansas roots run deep.
Now Bodeker says Democrats have stopped reaching out to rural America.
We don't have any rural messengers anymore. We don't have anyone that speaks for the party in the dirt, like in the grassroots, you know, not just on the surface. Like if you went outside to mow your lawn and you used a scissor, and you just kind of snip around at stuff, that is what the Democratic Party, those in power, do.
Josh Pope is Elkader's mayor.
I think the small town is forgotten. Washington itself, I think they're out of touch.
When was the last time a president came here?
The actual president?
Any sitting president.
I don't think of any.
Like much of the rural Midwest, small towns in northeastern Iowa have lost population as younger people move away. Manufacturing plants have shuttered and family farms are forced out of business. And while unemployment is low, the incomes are stagnant, and many feel left behind. Justin Augustine is the general manager of Mobile Track Solutions in Elkader, which manufactures scrapers for farming and road construction.
You've really been here at the forefront of watching so many sister towns where the manufacturer left, right? Yeah. Whatever, you know, it's a Sara Lee factory over here, a Maytag factory over there. How would you describe the state of the rural economy right now?
It's matching the worldwide economy right now. The question, Chuck, is how long is that going to last? What other kind of challenges there are?
I think the evolution is all of Iowa and most of the Midwest is turning Republican. Older. You know, the average age of American farmer I know is 57 or 58. Pretty old. And the state is pretty white.
I think probably in the Obama years that farmers in Iowa were left behind. Farmers in Iowa in 2008 were like, let's go along with this big change and we'll be brought along with it. And then there was no engagement.
They're very condescending, especially to normal Iowans. If they just tried to relate better with normal everyday people, they would succeed. Hillary Clinton is a prime example of not being able to relate to Midwestern people. And that's why she's
a Midwesterner.
That was the irony. Either way.
In 2016, Trump won 59% of rural voters, a number that rose to 65% in 2020.
I love Iowa. We've really hit a note with the evangelicals. We've hit a note with the Tea Party. I think I'm going to buy a farm and settle down over here. Right? No, I think I will. A medium-sized farm, because I don't know if I want to work that hard, right?
All these kind of dissatisfaction that people had with the life, with the way the small towns are changing, that things are that. He gave a voice to that, or more importantly, he gave permission for those folks to say, that's not right, or I don't like this, or these things are changing and I don't want them to change anymore. There is something to be said for having a guy who's on your side, who's willing to say the things that you're like afraid to say.
In rural America, you'll get a version of, yeah, look, Trump's not my first choice, but he speaks for me. And I hear that. What is that when I assume you hear that from Pete, you're nodding along. What do you think is in that code? What is that voter trying to say?
Racism.
Do you think it's all?
Yeah, and xenophobia and misogyny.
It's the permission slip?
Yeah.
According to Poynter, at least 14 local newspapers have closed in Iowa since the beginning of the pandemic. Replacing them, echo chambers that reinforce political polarization.
It's just a number of things. Fox News on in the diner, social media.
Facebook replacing the local paper?
Yes. Tell me anyone who actually sits down and gets the newspaper at home anymore.
How nationalized has local politics here in Decorah gotten?
It's like, who's asking for the book bans? Nobody I know is asking for the book bans, and I'm talking to Republicans and Democrats. Where is that agenda coming from? It didn't grow from grassroots here up. It came top down.
You feel like it's outside agitation?
I think it's outside agitation, yes, I do. And it's tearing local communities up. What the GOP has figured out is messaging works, whether it's right or not, whether it's truthful or not. They can say, build the wall. People get it.
Democrats running this fall are looking to a handful of candidates who have had success.
On your yard signs, is the word Democrat on it?
No. Name ID for an office like state auditor is so low. My yard signs and my bumper stickers have my name as big as possible so that if you aren't driving right by, you can still see it from 2 blocks away, right? And the only way to do that is to have it say Rob Sand State Auditor, right? There's not enough room.
Number of words.
Rob Sand was elected Iowa State Auditor in 2018 at the age of 36, the only Democrat to flip a statewide office that year.
I go to Democratic meetings where I'm supposed to be throwing out red meat, and I ask people, are you engaging in debate in a way that actually makes people want to join you? Or are you, instead, putting on the caps lock and screaming at people, right?
So I've talked to a lot of Democrats in eastern Iowa who, a couple of them were running for office, and none of them have said they're going to put the word Democrat on their yard sign. What does that tell you?
We need to connect. We are in the process of making sure that we are rebranding Iowa, making sure that folks in rural parts of the state know that rural working class voices are important.
Give some advice to the National Party. How do they connect more in the Midwest?
I'm frustrated with it because I think that too few people are actually focused on trying to do what they can do with 50 votes, whether those votes are Democratic votes or Republican votes in the Senate. Get stuff done. Quit beating up on people that you don't agree with who otherwise might do something that you think is a good idea, right?
There's a lot of national Democrats that say, Iowa's gone. Walk away. What would you say to them?
I'd say hi.
Would you like to see them do simply to make it easier for you to run for office someday?
Boots on the ground. Really help shore up. Yep.
You come across kind of bleak about the Democrats around here. Do you mean to?
I don't mean to.
No,
but I'm a realist.
It sounds like you think this is pretty embedded. This is not going to get solved overnight.
No.
No. You know, the next Barack Obama showing up isn't going to be able to flip the switch.
No. Yeah. No. It's going to take years.
Joining me now, I've got Amy Allison. She's founder and president of She the People. Former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, also an NBC News political analyst, and Democratic pollster Brian Stryker, a partner at Impact Research. Welcome to you all. Claire, I have to start with you on this because Missouri, you lived this. You saw, first it was Missouri's 7th, as they would always say. That was the rural heart, if you will. I hope I'm getting that right. And then you just saw it spread like wildfire, places that voted Democrat for decades in Missouri. What's your reaction?
Well, I don't want to underestimate the challenge the Democratic Party has in rural America. And you're right, Chuck, I lived it. I watched it. Over my 40 years in politics, I watched the boot heel in Missouri go from the most reliably Democratic area to an area that I think maybe Joe Biden got 20%. And what has happened here is it's a complicated stew, and it started before Trump. But there's no question that Donald Trump was a marketer, first and foremost, and he mainlined grievance. And a lot of folks that live in rural Missouri, and I did 50 town halls, most of them in rural Missouri, the year before I ran in 2018. And my doors were open to anybody who wanted to come in and any question I asked, and there was a lot of anger. A lot of anger, more so than when I did the town halls over Obamacare. There was so much anger, and it's like Trump gave a voice to their grievance. You're being looked over. You're being looked down upon. Everybody's getting something but you. It's not the microchip, it's the Mexicans that are stealing your jobs. And this disconnect between the reality that their economies are so dependent on tax dollars. I mean, rural economies only work now because of tax dollars, whether it is healthcare dollars or whether it is ag subsidies. So there is this total disconnect, right. And the Republicans have been masterful at messaging around things that are changing for the good, but that scare people around culture issues.
I mean, what's your reaction to this? You heard from some of these candidates that they just want reinforcements. They want people to show up. They want the Democrats to show up in these places.
Part of it is taking a step back. I mean, this whole discussion's around how Democrats have lost rural America, but it could easily be named how Democrats have won multiracial America. You know, you look at places like Albany, Georgia, that's rural, places where Democrats have made gains over the last couple of years. And also the reality that white voters, both men and women, are not drivers, increasingly, every election cycle of Democratic Party wins. And that's at every level. So the question for us to ask is, when we look at the Democrats losing steam in places that are largely white areas, pockets of America, look alternatively to the places where Democrats are being very successful. It isn't just exclusively urban areas. It's also suburban areas where the population is changing. and it's also slices of rural America in places like Albany, as I mentioned. My feeling is this. If you are looking to white voters for victory in 2022, the Democrats investing money, trying to satisfy voters who voted for Trump or voting for Republicans more and more, it's going to be a tough road for Democrats. If instead they shift their focus to voters, not only voters of color, particularly women of color voters, Black, Asian American, and Latinos, who Asian American and Latino women have increased their voter turnout some 25 to 27%. That's the powerhouse for the Democrats, and my argument is to shift focus there.
Brian, go. I know.
I have to
go
say
for
something.
it, Claire. I think Brian's going to say the same thing.
First of all, we are losing ground in suburban right now. And secondly, that is a great, we had a record turnout in 2018 in blue areas of our state. We killed it in St. Louis, in Kansas City, killed it. Our numbers were way over what we ever projected would be. Our voters turned out, progressive voters turned out, but there were more of them. And the problem is we have too many states where if our strategy is only motivating our multiracial base, we will not control the United States Senate because we have way too many Democratic senators from states that are Trump states.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying. And I'll say for 22, the states are Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida as the top. All three of those states have great potential for the Democrats if they lean into particularly women of color voters who are 6 times more likely to vote for Democrats than white guys. And the strategy is for a group of, Democrats who have demonstrated to be the most loyal. Traditionally, the party's ignored us, but we delivered victories and high turnout for 2020, and we'll do the same for 2020.
Let me bring in Brian Stryker because, Brian, this is the issue, right? The either-or strategy. Is there an...
It's both.
There's not an or here, is it?
It's both.
No, I mean, and I think I'd say two things. The new boot heel to me is the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. Some of these counties that are extremely rural, 95% Latino, and Trump gained 20 points in them, and they're becoming, they've gone from deep blue to more swingy, and then I'm worried about where that trend goes, and that sort of, we're having challenges with rural Latinos all over the Southwest. But I think in general, if you're persuading people to vote for us, whether that's getting them, off their couch and to the polls or getting them to vote for us and not Republicans, you got to be doing both. And frankly, a lot of the things that work for one group are working for another. I mean, they're just looking for someone who can solve the big problems of the day. They feel like gets them, understands their lives, and I don't think that there's do we go for the base or do we go for the swing voters? Like we can't do one or the other.
Brian, you've actually said a few times you worry that the strategists in the Democratic Party are more out of touch than some of the elected officials with rural and exurban America.
Well, yeah, I think that the other thing we have to sort of throw onto here is a big part of our problem is voters without a college degree, right? Those are heavily, whether we're talking about white rural voters of color, they're just less likely to have a college degree, and those are the voters that are slipping away from us. I think there is a specific rural problem as we get looked at more as a big city party and a sort of metro area party that they just don't feel like there's a place for them. But I do think there's part of that just where our people are coming from that are working campaigns and strategists and stuff like that. And it's hard for all of us. I don't mean to cast aspersions, but I do think we're not hearing a lot of rural voters. We're just not hearing them. We don't understand their lives.
Amy, we're all piling on you here a little bit, but the either or. I mean, how do you win the United States Senate without rural? You don't win Florida without losing rural Florida by 60.
It's so interesting because the pile-on is around a change of consciousness for the Democratic Party to really acknowledge that women of color's high vote turnout. Yeah, there was high vote turnout across, but women of color, it was phenomenal. And that's what delivered the victories that really counted. And we made great gains in states like Florida. Look at Florida now. A lot's been said about rural Florida, but Democrats lose statewide by about less than 1%, 40,000 votes. Where are those votes going to come from? If we really look at who's most likely to vote for Democrats, new populations of voters rise to the importance for Democrats. Caribbean women, for example, Haitian and Jamaican women who are never in the public conversation actually have the numbers to turn a state like Florida. So we need to change the consciousness and conversation.
Claire, last word.
Well, we don't have to win rural America, but we can't lose it by 30 and still gain the presidency and control Congress. And so it's all of the above.
The debate continues, but we're going to take a closer look at the Democratic Party struggles with rural voters of color in rural America, where it is a question not only of support, but will they turn out to vote? They kind of felt left behind as well. Antonia Hilton reports when we come back. Welcome back. The Democratic Party's challenges with rural voters go beyond the Midwest and go beyond white rural voters. My colleague Antonia Hilton recently went to North Carolina and spoke with African-American voters who are simply losing faith in the entire system.
My name is Cynthia. I'm executive director of the New Rural Project.
This is how Cynthia Wallace spends many of her weekends.
Oh, right here. Okay.
She throws on a new Rural Project tee and a pair of sneakers. Then she knocks on strangers' doors or meets them on the street and listens.
Did you get a chance to vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you are a strong voter?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to vote last year?
No, I didn't vote last year.
Okay. Well, that's what we're here talking about.
Oh, okay. It may sound like a simple act, but for black residents in rural Anson County, North Carolina, this kind of visit from a civic group is rare.
You got a little pocket in there? I'm just piling you up.
In recent years, voter participation has been slipping. Jobs have gone. Many residents feel like nobody cares about what they have to say.
What do you worry about every day?
Violence, poverty, just things that can be improved.
National Democrats have raised alarms about support slipping in rural America over the last 2 decades, where Donald Trump won roughly 2/3 of the rural vote. Here in Anson, 2,500 voters of color sat out the last election, as a state Supreme Court seat was decided by 401 votes out of 5 million cast. To Cynthia, the disconnect isn't rocket science. Few do what her team does in the rural South. Even worse, they sometimes forget black people live there. Do you feel like you've seen the changes that you deserve here?
You know, in Anson County, those young men, black men under 40, turned out at 35% in the 2020 general election. And so actually having a chance to have conversation with them, and the fact that they really seem to feel, you know, kind of validated to be heard.
Even the church, traditionally the beating heart of black politics and optimism, is losing some ground.
It's time to rally the troops. COVID has spread us every which way. We can't always keep up with whether people coming or going. You got to take.
Pastor Alban Burney saw the pandemic frighten and diminish his congregation. Young faces often aren't out in the pews.
Here in Anson County, I think survival is on everyone's mind.
Are people losing faith?
I think people are losing faith. I think that's just the reality of the situation. When you feel like something was taken from you, it's real easy to lose faith in a process that was established.
We spent a day at a popular black-owned convenience shop in Morven, a town in Anson that is almost 100% black, hanging out with entrepreneurs, nurses, and veterans.
I don't believe in the government too much.
Do you feel like the Democratic Party has done much for black people in the last couple years?
Taking us down through there, that's about it. Taking all our shit. Like the rest of them, they ain't gonna do nothing for us.
All right. Well, you have it there.
There you go.
What's up? How are you? Good.
What's made you feel like voting isn't worth it?
For you to sit there and you see your elders say something to, you know, the town hall or something like that, and nothing's being done about it, after a while it just becomes a non-factor in your life. You just feel like, I'm gonna just do what I gotta do, survive on a day-to-day, make a way for my family and everything like that. Politics don't really matter.
Has Biden and generally the Democratic Party, have they fulfilled promises that they've made over the last couple of years?
To me, in a small town like this, it really doesn't matter who you have in office. The effect
that we experience is the same. It don't matter if it's Biden, it don't matter if it's Trump, it don't matter if it's Obama or Clinton or Bush. It really doesn't matter. What we feel down here is exactly the same. You know, they could never even tell us who the president is, and we really still going to be exactly the same. You know what I mean?
Cynthia Wallace and Pastor Alvin Burney aren't going to wait for any national politicians to come to rural North Carolina. Whether on the pavement or at the pulpit, every weekend they'll listen.
Glad to see you.
Do people still believe things can change here?
I think they want to believe that. I think it's up to me. I think it's up to other advocates to inspire that change.
Thank you to Antonia Hilton. And that's all we have for Meet the Press Reports for this episode. Thanks for being here. Join us next time as we take a look at the importance of the black church to the success of the Democratic Party with an increasingly secular political left. Can black pastors maintain their influence? Can Democrats win at the ballot box if they don't? I'll see you next time on Meet the Press Reports, and I'll see you this Sunday on Meet the Press.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.